Morning to everyone. I hope you had, this is the last training of the week. You will be able to recover a bit during the weekend. I'm pretty sure I'm going to sleep 2 days in a row. I will, 2 days and 2 nights, of course. But anyway, today what I would like to do is just to show you how really X11 or X12 or X13 is working. So I'm not going into the details, but I will give you the idea of how it works. It's very, you will see that it's almost a basic common sense. It's very logical and very easy to understand the iterative procedure of X11. So when we did, we will do that in the first part of the lecture. I think I will give you a second lecture just after, which is a lecture around quality diagnostic. I would like to warp up today the lectures so we can do almost only practical works next week. And so I would like to finish today, even if, of course, I come back on what I said next week, okay? I could make some refresh your memory or whatever, repeat things. But I would like to, because yesterday we had a question of M statistic. It's better to have not a solution today, but that everyone knows what M statistics are, okay? Because they are very important to judge of the quality of the adjustment. So this is my objective for today, to give you this kind of knowledge before we do a lot of exercise next week. Any question on what we saw yesterday? Do you have something to ask?
I have a question on the trading day effect or working days. This is detailed data versus aggregate. Do you think the trading day effect or working days effect only working on the detailed data, and it's not really, we cannot see in aggregate data? In this case, for example, the trade data, there is a detailed one which is until 8-digit HS code versus 2-digit. Or also it's related with if we use monthly or quarterly. What is the, do you think from your experience, what is the result will be? Thank you.
You remember I'm from Normandy in France, so I never give a precise answer. Okay, no, this is a good question, Fatou, a very good question. And we have some elements to answer to this question. This is what the question you ask is a variant, if I can say so, of a more general question, which is the direct versus indirect problem. For example, if let me give you the global thing, and we will discuss after your question, your precise question. If I have a GDP, I have two ways to analyze, to seasonally adjust the global GDP. I can directly work on it. I can do the seasonal adjustment as we did. Or I can also seasonally adjust the components of the GDP and aggregate them to get the adjusted GDP. So on the one side, you directly adjust the GDP. This is the direct adjustment. On the other side, you adjust the components and you aggregate the components, so you get an indirect adjustment. We will discuss that next week. Okay, the problem of this problem. Your question is a variant of this problem. Now, the aggregation you suggest is not is not by breakdown, for example, but is by month. You have a month and you aggregate to the quarter. So if I want, your question is, if I want to seasonally adjust, let us say a quarterly time series, but I have the monthly time series, should I aggregate, seasonally adjust or calendar adjust the quarterly series directly, or should I adjust the monthly series and then aggregate the month in quarter to get the seasonally or calendar adjusted series? Okay, so let me comment that. First thing, for example, Italian people are doing so for calendar adjustment. When they do have the monthly data and they use, for example, quarterly data in their models, they are now casting models. They are going to seasonally adjust the monthly data and calendar adjust the monthly data because they see the calendar effects and they see the seasonal component. It's more important usually in monthly data. And after they aggregate the monthly data to give the quarterly adjusted data. We do that in some occasions. The problem is the following, it's basic common sense. The more aggregated, the smoother the series. So a quarterly series is always smoother than a monthly series. So almost by construction, it's easier to analyze. Okay, so you will do, it will be easier to adjust a quarterly series than to adjust a monthly series. So the point is the following. If you work on a monthly series, because it will be more difficult, you might have more problems and the adjustment might be less optimal than if you do exactly the aggregate on the adjustment on the aggregate, okay? It could be, it's a basic common sense. Let me give you a very good example of that. I am in Vietnam, okay? I have my trade series, monthly trade series. They are very much probably, I don't know, but it's likely that they will be affected by the Tet, okay? By this huge festival. But the Tet is always in January or February, okay? So it's always in the first quarter. So when you aggregate the raw data, you do not have a specific Tet impact. You have a seasonal impact, okay? So you just have one thing to correct, the seasonality. You do not have to correct for the Tet effect. You see what I mean? So that's why I'm from Normandy. I will not give you a perfect answer. I will say yes, it's better to aggregate and to make the adjustment, either the seasonal adjustment or the calendar adjustment. But no, no, because you have more information in the monthly series, so you can perhaps do a better but more difficult job. So that's why it's during the first lecture, the first day, I told you that you must set up a policy for seasonal adjustment. This is one topic you have to solve. Are you going more to direct adjustment, or are you going to promote direct adjustment or indirect adjustment? This is a decision that has to be taken at the national basis in the institute.
Sorry, Dominique.
Yeah.
In your example here, can you hear me?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Why you cannot recommend that we use the monthly data? Because we know if we use quarterly data, we cannot see the trading effect, only the seasonal. But you cannot recommend using the monthly.
It's just because, okay, it's just a question of time. If people have monthly data, and if the institute publish monthly data, they have to seasonally adjust monthly data. Okay? If they publish quarterly data, they have to seasonally adjust quarterly data. It's an obligation. But in some occasions, when they start their work on seasonal adjustment, usually they focus on quarterly data. They focus on quarterly data because, except in some occasions like trade statistics, because it's much more difficult to get monthly data. It's more costly to get monthly data than to get quarterly data. So usually they do not have to invest a lot in trading day adjustment. I don't. Let me give, the situation across countries in Europe is very different, okay? For example, let us talk a bit about quarterly national accounts. France does not compute a raw quarterly national GDP. They do not, okay? They do not compute a raw, they do not do that. They do directly a seasonally adjusted GDP. So they start from monthly data, they seasonally adjust them, and they compute the aggregate, the temporal aggregate, and they compute the quarterly GDP from the monthly seasonally adjusted indicators. They do that. And we have a very curious situation, is that Eurostat asks for raw data, and so they compute after they did the adjustment, they compute the raw data. So it depends on the country. It's a question of history. Italian people compute quarterly GDP, raw data, and they do that from monthly data with monthly indicator, and they adjust this monthly indicator after to get the adjusted GDP. You know, it depends on the country. If you take, for example, the case of a young country, young in statistics, usually they do not have monthly indicators. They do not have a lot of monthly indicators. So they have to focus on quarterly data. And very often, for example, some parts of the quarterly national accounts are modeled. They just take, they do what they can. So they, for example, if they have no indicator, monthly indicator, no quarterly indicator, just annual indicator, they will take the annual indicator and disaggregate it, okay? So if they do that, they will not have any trading day effect. So the situation can really change from one country to the other, really. I would say for it's just basic common sense. If a country is starting the work, the simpler, the better. So just to be more confident in seasonal adjustment, it's better to start with quarterly series and then after to go to monthly series. This is why you can see it. You will see it during the next week. quarterly series are usually much more simple than monthly data. So it's better for them. But if they publish monthly series, they will have to adjust them. Okay. So once again, I do not give you a proper answer, I guess. I'm just playing with words, but it depends on the country, it depends on the sector. Like, for example, some series cannot have a calendar effect. If you think, for example, on the production of gas, of petrol offshore, you cannot have any calendar effect. You cannot. When the pump functions, it functions. It functions 24/7, and you have no calendar effect. So it depends on the series, it depends on the level of aggregation, it depends on a lot of factors. But you have to be ready to do the job. So we are going to study the calendar effects. And I'm pretty sure that the advanced training will be around calendar effects, mostly. But it's tricky, it's not easy, because in most occasions, the calendar effect is very small. And so if it is small, it's very difficult to estimate, to give a proper estimate of it, because you have a lot of noise and you do not know exactly what is the impact. But anyway, we will do the job. I'm sure I didn't answer the question, I'm sure, but it's because there's no precise answer. Any other question?
Thank you.
But you will see that, as soon as we will work with the data, we will try to estimate a calendar effect, you will see that it's tricky. You will see that it's very unstable, very tricky. You will see that next week. Okay, so any other question before I start? No? Sounds good? Okay, so let me start with a grand tour of X12, X13. Okay, so I will share my screen. And okay, so you see the slides. So what I want to do today is just explain you how X13 is working. I'm going to repeat myself. I know that. So you will see slides you already saw, but this is a way to put the slides in your head to be sure that you have in mind the correct things, the important things. Okay, so a bit of history. In fact, X13 is the last variant of the last release of a program which was called at the very beginning X0, which was the first automatic seasonal adjustment program. X was for experimental, okay? So the X was this one. And so it was at the beginning of the 50s. So you had at this moment the first computers, okay? So let me tell you a short story about computers at that time. They were absolutely huge, huge. It was huge machine. And to give you an idea, when I started at INSEE, it was in 74, 5. I was a student at INSEE. So we had the opportunity to use the INSEE computer, central computer, the one which was used, for example, for the census. And I remember that the big, let us say the big computer of INSEE had a memory of 256K kilooctet. Okay, so it was very 256. So it was nothing, absolutely nothing. You have much more in your cell phone now. Your cell phone is incredibly more powerful than was the big computer from IMTS in the 70s. So you have to understand that these computers, it was a revolution, but they were just a big, it was very basic. And there's another story in this time. You had lamps. It was not electronic. It was, you had a lot of wires, you had a lot of lamps in the computer. And from time to time, in the room, you had some flies, for example, and they went to the lights and they burned themselves on the light and they just broke down the system. This is the origin of the term bug. We have a bug. The problem was that a real bug, a fly, for example, just come on a lamp and just a bulb and just broke down the system. And we kept this word bug to talk about a problem in a program, a computer problem. So it was just, so it was the old times, very old times. I was born almost with X0. Okay, so after you had a lot of different variant release of the program up to the 60s, where the US Bureau of Census proposed X11. X11 was the first really official release of this program. And after in the 80s, Statistics Canada used ARIMA models. If you remember Boxer-Jenkins, it was in the 70s. So in the 80s, X11, Statistics Canada used the results from Boxer-Jenkins on the computer to improve the adjustment at the end of the series using forecasts. 20 years later, you have the Bureau of Census publish a new version of X11 ARIMA called X12 ARIMA. And then in 2006, you have a very new version, X13 ARIMA with seats. The seats part, nobody use it. Even the Bureau of Census, I guess. But anyway, so this is X13 ARIMA. And in 2015, JDemetra Plus arrived, and it was, we are using it. And one of the two methods you can find in JDemetra Plus is X13 ARIMA. So that's why, you know, I call it even X11, X12, X13. For me, it's not X0, definitely, but between X11 and X13, the differences are not so important. The principle of the software is still the same, and this is the principle we are going to see and to study a bit this morning. So if you want to have documentation about X11 or X13, you can go to the US Bureau of Census website. This is the link. It's not the same link you have in your slides. I discovered it has been updated. I discovered that just this morning, so I changed it. I will change the slides, Siska. I will send you the new set of slides after. So if I go to this website, it should be there. Here is the website. So you can find a lot of things inside, and in particular, you can find, if you want, a lot of papers. So if you go on this tab, you will see, for example, here, SA papers, okay? So if you go to SA papers, you have a lot of things. For example, you will find historical papers historical papers on X11 and seasonal adjustment. So you have everything here, okay? You also census paper, you have a lot of things, you will see. So a lot of documentation. This is a very important website. If you want to become a real professional in seasonal adjustment, you will have to go through all these papers, okay? You will have, I mean, hopefully you have a book that will help you. The book is the one I wrote with Benoit Kenville from Statistics Canada almost 20 years ago. My God, time flies. I can't believe it. It's always a slide very difficult for me. You know, I'm getting old. But this, you have this book, so you can, there's everything you can imagine in X11. And after you have this paper from David Finlay, Brian Mansell, Bill Bell, Mark Otto, and Chen about X12 ARIMA, a very good paper you can find on the website, on the US Bureau of Census website. Okay, so a reminder, because we already saw this graph, but it has to be in your head now. Never forget that when you are talking about seasonal adjustment. You have two blocks, in fact, in X13 ARIMA or in X12 ARIMA. You have a first block, which is, you remember now, the reg ARIMA block. So we are going to use regression analysis with ARIMA errors. We are going to use that to estimate the outliers, to estimate the trading day effect, and to do some forecast and backcast of a series to be able to use symmetric moving averages as much as we can. And you have, of course, a lot of diagnostics to judge the quality of this model. And after, when you clean the series, if I can say so, if you remove all the non-linear effects like the outliers, the trading day effect, you will do a seasonal adjustment, which means the decomposition, the estimation of the trend cycle, the seasonal component and the irregular, and you will do that using moving averages, mostly the same kind of moving average we studied yesterday. And after, you have all the diagnostic you can use to judge the quality of the adjustment. Okay, so remember that. So first screening of a series, ARIMA modeling, and after seasonal adjustment. Seasonal adjustment, I remind you, it means estimation of a seasonal component, okay? So the ARIMA modeling, just to stabilize the endpoint estimation, you will use symmetric moving average on the forecast. It's a very old idea. I find a paper in 1877 and in 1931 describing exactly the idea of forecast. For example, here you have a quotation from Macaulay in his book, Smoothing of Time Series in 1931. So much before X11, much before, 20 years before X11. However, graduation was the name for smoothing at this time. In English, they were using graduation. Today, we will use smoothing. Okay. Graduation of the ends of almost any series is necessarily extremely hypothetical unless facts outside the range covered by the graduation are used in obtaining the graduation. So you see, it means that unless facts outside the range covered by the graduation, so basically it means forecast. You need to have elements to see how the series is going to react in the future. So for mathematically inelegant, this is funny, this one, I will comment this mathematically inelegant. The most desirable procedure in a majority of the cases of smoothing, okay, graduation, is to smooth not only the actual data, but extrapolated data which sometimes may be extremely crude estimates. So in this quotation, it's clear, it's very clear. You have to forecast the data. You need to give some information to the algorithm on the potential future of a series, okay? And so for mathematically inelegant, of course, it's funny because nowadays we have a very elegant procedure to do that, which is ARIMA modeling. But remember that the ARIMA models were really created in 27, so just a few years before Macaulay's book, just a few years, and they could be used only in the 70s with the apparition, the appearance of a computer. Okay, but everything was there at this time. So I remind you, it's the time to close the week. So we take stock of what we did, the important things of the week. Here you have the usual additive model for seasonal adjustment. I remind it to you, the trend cycle, the seasonal component, the outlier component, which can be, you might have several outliers. It's not just one unknown. You might have 3, 4, 5 unknowns, okay? The trading deck regressor, the moving holiday regressor, and the irregular. The irregular is in fact some kind of residual where you put everything which is not in these 5 first parts, okay? So you might have some kind of structure here. It's scarce, but you might. So in this case, all the components are supposed to be orthogonal and non-seasonal, except, of course, the seasonal factor, okay? So it means be careful about all the consequences of the hypothesis. If I say they are non-seasonal, so trading day should not be seasonal, okay? Should not be. But if you think about trading day is an effect, a link to the number, for example, of Monday, number of Tuesday, number in the month, okay? Number of each kind of days in the month. But it's clear that you will have always more Monday in January than in February, because Monday is larger, has 31 days instead of 28 or 29. So you always have more Monday on average in January than in February. By definition, this is a seasonal component, because you say that from the trading day effect perspective, January is different from February. If you say so, and for March and so on, if you say so, it means that you have a seasonal effect in trading days. So you will have to take it into account. So we will study that in the advanced course, how we do that. At the moment, we do not do it. I didn't mention it. This is exactly the first time I mentioned this consequence of this apparently basic common sense hypothesis, okay? So after you have a seasonal adjustment in 2 steps, still a reminder, you decompose first the series, you estimate the outliers, the trading day effect and the moving holiday effect. And so the residual is a series, time series that will also follow an ARIMA model. So you adjust an ARIMA model to this series, Z sub t, and you forecast the future, okay? And after you will decompose ZT and its forecast in trend cycle, seasonal component, and irregular, okay? And the last step, I mean, it's not an important step, but you should have it in mind, it's that the outliers, you are going to put them according to the nature of the kind of outlier. You are going to put it either in the trend cycle, for example, if it is a level shift, or in the irregular, for example, if it's an additive outlier or if it is a transitory change. You will put it in the seasonal component only if it is a seasonal outlier. Okay? Any question on that? No. I mean, I already repeated that for 2 or 3 times, 4 times, and I will do it again next week, certainly. So keep that in mind. It's this thing is very important to have in mind the 2 parts, the 2 blocks. So what are going to do the 2 blocks exactly? So the Regarima model in its more automatic version will do an automatic choice of a decomposition model between additive and multiplicative. It will estimate automatically the missing values. It will detect and correct from outliers. It will detect correct and correct from calendar effects using a national calendar. If you integrate a national calendar in your in GD+, okay? So we will see how to do that later in the advanced course. And we'll do an ARIMA modeling of a series, backcast and forecast. And you have a quality diagnostic to check the validity of all what you do, okay? And the second part, we build the decomposition with X11. X11 will automatically choose the moving averages, do another, I should not say new, but another and automatic detection and correction of additive outliers, and we'll do the automatic decomposition of a series in trend cycle, seasonality, and irregular. And at the end of the day, you will have a quality diagnostics to check the validity of the decomposition. So there is here a very important thing I have to tell you, and you have to keep that in mind forever. Okay. These 2 steps are common to thrombocytes and to X13 ARIMA. They have these 2 steps, the reg ARIMA part and then the decomposition part. But there is a huge, huge, huge difference between the 2. Without the ARIMA model that you are going to detect and to estimate in the first part, thrombocytes cannot work. So thrombocytes relies, is based on the ARIMA model that will be detected. So the ARIMA model is incredibly important for thrombocytes. X11 ARIMA can work without this part. So it's better to have a good ARIMA modeling. It's always better to have good forecast, but it's not completely necessary for X11, for X12 ARIMA. It's not necessary. That's why a direct consequence of what I'm saying right now, a crisis like the COVID crisis is more easily handled by X11 than by thrombocytes. Why? Because the crisis will affect deeply the ARIMA modeling, which is not the case. And at the end of the day, X11 does not care so much about the ARIMA modeling. Okay? The point is that if the ARIMA modeling goes wrong for any reason, in particular a big crisis, your estimates of a trading day effect could be not stable. Okay? But it's not very important because inside, this is what I said here. Let me, here, the decomposition with X11, you have in the algorithm, the decomposition algorithm, an automatic detection and correction of additive outliers. So inside X11, even if you do not do a really good job at the beginning, doesn't matter. You have another treatment of outliers in the decomposition algorithm. Okay, and let me continue on that. Of course, when you do not know what is happening, like in the COVID crisis, we still do not know the impact on the economy. We are not able to measure it. And we do not even figure out what will be the impact in terms of unemployment, GDP, and so on. We do not know. We do not know, not yet. So even if you do not, as you do not know, you can imagine that any forecasting model relies on the past only. So you could never forecast a COVID crisis. You will never be able to forecast. So the ARIMA model, when you arrive at such a point with such a crisis, the ARIMA model is obviously completely stupid. It cannot take into account, you cannot forecast this kind of crisis. You never forecast a turning point with an ARIMA model. You cannot. It's impossible because it relies on the past. Of course, it relies on the past. And so you have no information of the future. And so you cannot imagine the COVID crisis, okay? And so the ARIMA model is always a bit tricky. It's a good and bad thing for seasonal adjustment. When nothing happens in a current situation, usual situation, the ARIMA modeling will work well, so you will get good results. But in turning points, for sure, the ARIMA model will not work very well. But X11 doesn't care about ARIMA modeling. So at the end of the day, you will have a problem because it's a crisis, but the problems will be less important by nature, by design, when you are using X11, X12, than when you are using thermoseats. The idea is the following. You are in a highway. You are driving on a highway. The road is perfect. There's no problem. You have side by side a Ferrari and 4x4. Okay, you have thermoseats and X13. And suddenly, you cannot forecast it, but suddenly you have troubles on the road. You have a lot of things. You have things where the concrete is destroyed. You have holes. You have a lot of things. The 4x4 will not react very badly. It will react, of course, but if the accident is not too big, the 4x4 will go through, okay? If you have small holes, things like that, it's not a big problem. But the Ferrari will explode. The Ferrari won't stand a single small hole, okay? It cannot. This is exactly what is happening here between thermoseats and X11 ARIMA. So it's clear that if you are driving a Ferrari and you have a bad road, you have to be a very, very, very good driver. Okay, you have to know exactly the Ferrari, exactly how the Ferrari reacts. Italian people can do that because they are very fond of thermoseats, and Ferrari also, by the way. Spanish people can do that because they are heavily trained in thermoseats. The other people, I mean, we are not in France we do not make use of thermoseats. We are using X13. And I think really it's easier. I will explain that during the more advanced course. Okay, so now let us see how X11 works. So I'm used to say that X11 is like a washing machine. I will explain you things, okay? So the first thing, you have this kind of algorithm in two parts. And you will see that the two parts are exactly the same, except for the choice of the moving averages. So the first thing, you must have in mind what we did with the Excel file yesterday. Okay, so we have your raw data. Your raw data is X sub T. You have a trend cycle, a seasonal component, and an irregular. We are in the second step. So all the other parts have been estimated and removed. So this is my model. The first thing, for example, if I have a monthly time series, or if I have a quarterly, it will be similar. If I have a monthly time series, I will use a 2x12 moving average to estimate the trend cycle. This is what we did yesterday with the Excel file. We use a 2x4. If you remember this curious moving average of coefficient 1/8, 2/8, 2/8, 2/8, 1/8. So on 5, a symmetric moving average on 5 points. And this moving average, this curious moving average, the 2x4, removed, if you remember, I have the number in mind, it conserves the straight line, locally straight lines. It removes 22%, 78% of the irregular, and it cancels out the seasonality of order 4, so the quarterly seasonal component. So it's here you say for a 2x12, because we have a monthly time series. And so you are going to remove quite a lot the seasonal component and the irregular. So you get a first estimate of a trend cycle, okay? Why is it a first estimate? It's just because it's a rough estimate. It's just a basic estimate. So if I have it, if I remove the trend cycle to the series, to the raw data, I will have an estimate of a seasonal plus irregular component. Okay, I just remove this part. So this is what I do here. I could perhaps make it a bit larger. Okay, so here it's easier than the zoom, the Windows zoom. Here you have a first estimate of a seasonal irregular component. You just remove from the raw data your estimate, your first estimate of a trend cycle. Okay, so now you have to imagine what I'm going to tell you. Up to now, I was just using the series as a vector. Okay, so I have X1, the series X1, X2, X3, X4. You have a time and you have a vector. Okay, now I'm going to change the representation of a time series. I'm going to put it in a table. So imagine now that your time series, you put it in a table where the columns are the months and the lines are the years. Okay, so for each column, for example, for the first column, you will have in this table of the values for January, for each year, 1 January per year and 1 February per year, and so on. And so you have the values of the seasonal plus irregular component by month. Okay, remember the graph we had in JD+. What I'm saying is just that, let me show you. I will do it, okay? Let me go just to show you, okay? I will just do very quickly something. So spreadsheet, I have everything now. So statistical method, seasonal adjustment, multiprocessing new. I will take, I guess, the GDP. So sorry, I change it. I take RSR1, okay. I take that, I put it inside, and I will just take the first one, just for the, okay, sorry. So here, so look, in this graph, the series is a vector, okay? Here, you have a seasonally and seasonal irregular ratio, but you have it by quarter, okay? If my series would have been monthly, I would have had the month, the 12 month. So here you have all the values, the dots are the values of a seasonal irregular component, plus irregular component, okay? And so I have this cloud, you can see the points, I have this cloud, and so I am going to smooth this cloud, okay? This is the blue line. I smooth each clouds of Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. I would have smoothed for a monthly series, the cloud for January, February, March, April, and so on. Okay, I smooth that. So let me come back on my, so you have the estimation of a seasonal component by a moving average, 3 by 3 over each month. Okay, so you take all the January points, you smooth them and so on. So it gives you a first estimate. Because you smooth it, you remove a part of the irregular. So you smooth it and you have this estimation, the first estimation of a seasonal component. When after it's something a bit curious, but I want that you have some kind of compensation of seasonal components. So basically, on average, here I have a multiplicative model. On average, my seasonal component should be equal to 1 on 1 year, because they should compensate. Okay. So to be sure that they compensate, I am going to normalize the coefficients. Okay, so I can do that. So I have a new, to assure that the sum of the coefficients is close to 0 for an additive model, I will normalize them and get my first estimate of a normalized seasonal component. And so, because I have my first estimate of this part, I can remove it and get a first estimation of a seasonally adjusted series. Okay, this is what we did yesterday with Excel. But what is going to do now, X11, is a bit different now. So I have my first estimate. So the consequence of this first estimate is that in this seasonally adjusted series, I have less seasonality. I removed a large part of a seasonal component. And so now what I can do from this one, I will try to get a second estimation of a trend by smoothing again this new series. And this new series does not have anymore a big seasonal component. So I can use another moving average, which is called the Anderson moving average. I can use it to smooth, to get a very nice smoothed trend. So I'm going to do it again with this new moving average. And I will repeat the processes. When I have this estimate of a trend cycle, I get a new estimate of a seasonal irregular component by removing the trend cycle from the raw data. And I will redo the estimation of a seasonal component by month for each month or for each quarter, depending on the periodicity of a series. And I will renormalize the series, and I will get a second estimation of a seasonally adjusted data. Okay, so you see that basically the first part, the first 4 steps, and the last 4 steps are similar in spirit. The only difference is the choice of a moving averages. But this is very simple. So now, what is X11? This is basically this algorithm in 2 parts that X11 is going to repeat 3 times in a row. So it's some kind of washing machine. So you have a first estimate of a trend cycle, you get a first estimate of a seasonal component, a first estimate of a seasonally adjusted series, and you iterate the process to refine the estimations. Okay, we will detail that in the advanced course, but this is basically the idea. Okay, let me let me stop just for a while now. So I'm going to come back to you. And do you have any question on this process? No? No question on the chat? No? Nothing? Okay. So when you drive a car, it's always better to know roughly how a car is working. It's good to know that you have wheels, that you have an engine, that you have, how you call it? I forgot the name of, what is the name in English of, sorry? I do not hear you. I can't see your lips moving, but Siska, what is the name? I forgot it. Anyway, you know what I mean, okay? So it's always better to have a big picture of how the car is working if you want to drive it, okay? It's the same. For X11, it's always better to have a rough idea of what's going on, okay? So now what I'm going to do is to show you, for example, on the GDP we just adjust a few minutes ago. I will show you the various steps of the algorithm. So let me just show you. Yeah, I will. So let me share my screen again. So now I go to that. If I want to show you on this example how it works, so this is the final results here, okay? So I told you you have a 3 iteration of this 2-step algorithm. So here you have the final results with the final seasonal ratio, seasonal coefficient, and here the trend and the seasonally adjusted figures. But if you want, just for the sake of a training, if you want to look at the decomposition, you will have a lot of things. So here, in fact, let me comment. You have here 5 steps: the A table, the B table, the C table, the D table, the E table. The first step are the A table is the adjustment. So you will see inside all the outliers and things like that. Here you have the raw data. Here you have the B table. What is the B table? The B table is just, do not be afraid. I guess we took, for the people from Brunei, don't be afraid. I think we took the logarithm of the data. Yeah, the series has been log transformed, so it's not sure that you will find. Yes, perhaps you have the real, anyway, you might know. This is the real data. Okay, so here you see you have your linearized time series. So you in B1, you enter in the X11 washing machine. So here you do have the linearized series without the outliers and the trading day effect. B2, it just, you see, you are going to lose 2 points, okay? It's because here you adapt, you smooth by the 1/8, 2/8, 2/8, 2/8, 1/8 moving average. So you are losing 2 points and you do the smoothing. So here, this is the first estimation of your trend cycle. Because I have a first estimation of a trend cycle, I get a first estimation of a seasonal irregular ratio. Here, it's you divide the raw data by the trend cycle. So you remove the trend cycle and you get the ratio, SI ratio, okay? After you do something a bit complex, but you are going to detect what are the outliers inside. If I told you that X11 had its own internal procedure to estimate and correct from additive outliers, it's done here. So here after you have the first the first seasonal component. After you have the first seasonally adjusted series, and you will do again things. So you will have here, because you have a first seasonal adjusted series, you can smooth it with an Anderson moving average. You will smooth it. You will do the second estimation of a seasonally irregular, second correction, second the normalized coefficient, the seasonally adjusted series, the new irregular, and here you are going to find if you have atypical points, and you are going to correct them. This is the B table. And you will see that the C table is exactly the same. So you have the raw data, I mean the data corrected from the outliers detected in this step. You do it again, moving average, seasonal irregular coefficient, seasonal and normalized coefficient, new seasonally adjusted series here, new smoothing with an Anderson moving average, new seasonally irregular component, new normalized seasonal component, sorry, new seasonally adjusted series, new seasonal irregular, and the correction from atypical points. And the last thing is exactly the same, but this is the final step. And at the end, you will have the trend cycle, the irregular, and somewhere the seasonally adjusted figures. So here you have the final points, and that's it. The E table and the F final filters and the quality measures are diagnostics to judge the quality of X11. So you see that, in fact, I will stop this sharing. You can see that this is not a difficult algorithm, but it's really a washing machine. So you repeat the cycle, you repeat the process, in fact, 6 times to clean again the data. And at the end of the day, you extract the components. And you do every time the same algorithm, the same thing, okay? So is it clear for you? It's important to see that once, okay? After, you will never forget exactly how it works, but you will never remember exactly how it works. But you will never forget now. So it's just a washing machine, and you are using different moving averages. Do you have any question on that?
There is one question in the chat room.
Oh, yes, there's one question. Yeah, I can see it. How to show color meaning in the chart? Let me share the screen. So if I go to the chart, if I want to explain the colors, it's not very difficult. I already did a couple of times. On the right chart, so the chart of a seasonal component, the dots is the seasonal irregular component, the sum of the two or the product of the two, depending on the model. The blue curve is the result of a smoothing by a moving average. Okay, so the blue curve is the estimate of a seasonal component. And the red curve, the red line, is just the average. Okay, it's just to show you if it's moving a lot or not. Okay, so in this one, it's moving pretty a lot. On the left, the colors you have at the bottom of the graph, you have a legend. So in orange, here you have the raw data. Y is the raw data. T is the trend cycle in green. And in blue, you have a seasonally adjusted figure. Okay. You could change these colors, you could change them, but I won't do it, okay? So I guess this is the answer to the question, no? Yeah.
So I mean for the first task. So for the many colors. So in the below how to show for the each mean for the example the yellow example the green the color and the yellow the color. So how maybe after the task, I want to copy and then the example the my report. So how to know the its mean for the color the first task.
I'm not sure. I do not understand what you are saying. There's too much echo. I mean, since the beginning of the week, we have a large echo in your room, and so you cannot really listen.
Mr. iPhone question is for the graph on the left side, the curve graph. There's 3 colors, so that's only stated Y and T and SA, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe that one that he is questioning. What is Y, what is T, and what is...
Okay, I just explained.
Sorry, if I may add that if he wants to make use of this chart and show it to other people, for example, and add info to it, for example, Y, instead of just put Y, he add the raw data, for example, Y raw data, for example, like that. So he make use of this chart to show to other people of this graph how to make it. It is possible.
Okay, yes, it is. Let me, we use Y, T, and SA because you have to use something to explain in the software the components. So Y are the raw data, T is the trend cycle, SA the seasonally adjusted series. Okay, you cannot change that, you cannot. But what you can do is, for example, I will do it for you, okay? So I can open, for example, Excel. I open it, this is a blank sheet. So let me show you now. I am in JD+. I can go, instead of using this graph, I can export directly the graph. I will show you again how to do it. But I can go to the table, select the table, okay? I select the table and I put it in Excel, okay? And then in Excel, I can do what I want, okay? I can do the graph I want, I can use the legend I want, I can do everything I want, okay? It's not a problem to export things. Okay, I did it manually right now. Next week, we will see how to do it automatically, of course, okay? So this is the first thing. The second thing, let me show you. If I want to export the graph itself, okay, I have just to do a right click on the graph and I put export image to clipboard. So I put it in the clipboard. I go back to Excel and I can put it here, for example. Sorry, I made a mistake, my mistake. So I do it again. Excuse me. I have a short. Let me go back. Sorry. Up. So export image to clipboard. I go back there and I do here. So I have it here. So it's very convenient. You know, you can, of course, you can do it for the other graph. There's no problem. You can import, of course, the second one. You right click here, export image to clipboard, and you go back to Excel or Word or whatever, and you put it inside, okay? So you can play with graphs and you can create your own graph if you want. But of course, from this table, from an Excel table to derive this graph is not an easy thing, okay? To do an Excel macro that will give you this graph, it's complex. But this graph is perhaps, these graphs are meant to help you in your analysis of a situation. They are not meant to be given to the user, because a user will never understand very well this graph with the four quarter. Okay, is it the complete answer to your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. So if there's no question right now, we could continue the lecture a bit, and then after we do a short break, and we go after to JD+, and we will work with JD+, okay? And so, let me continue. So I will do the first quality diagnostic, okay? So it was the session I have in mind for Monday, but I will do it, I will start it now, okay? If you have no more questions. So what do we have? If I want to judge the quality of a seasonal adjustment, I have several ideas in mind, okay? Of course, I do not want to have residual seasonality in my seasonally adjusted data, okay? And I do not want to have a trading day effect in my seasonally and my corrected time series, and my seasonally and calendar adjusted series. I do not want that. So for that, I have various tests. We already saw them 2 days ago. I will show you again the test, but you have various tests that you can use to detect, to see if you have a residual seasonality or not. What you want also, you want that your model is stable, because if the model is not stable, you will have large revisions. And if your series is your seasonally adjusted series is very revised, you will have it's no use for you, okay? So you want to have a stable model. And you want also to have a pretty smooth series just to be able to interpret it, but not something on this last item. In the seasonally adjusted data, you have the irregular, okay? You have a trend cycle and the irregular. So if your series is noisy at the beginning, your seasonally adjusted series will be noisy. You cannot reduce the noise, the irregular, with seasonal adjustment. You cannot, because you do not touch at the irregular part. So what do we have? We have, in fact, in X12, X11, we have what we call the M and Q statistics. We had a question on them yesterday. So let me explain roughly what they are doing. The basic idea is that you are going to check if your filters, the choice of the filters were relevant according to the series. So did the automatic choice of a filter perform well? You have some basic assumption on X11 filters. The basic assumption are the following. First, the series is not very, very, very noisy, which means that if you have too much noise, you will never be able to select the signal. I mean, remember this comparison I already made twice. If you see someone in the street talking at the phone, you know that you have a seasonal component. He is talking, there's no doubt, but there's too much noise in the street and you cannot hear what he's saying. So you know that you have a signal, he is speaking, but you are not able, because you have too much noise, you are not able to estimate what he is saying. This is exactly the same thing, just basic common sense. If your series is too erratic, you will never be able to give a good estimation of what the person is saying. You see what I mean? Yeah? So the first thing is that you are going to see if your series is not too noisy for the choice of the filters. And what does not want X11 also is that the seasonal factor evolves a lot. If they are moving very, very, very fastly, and I will give you some example of that, it's tricky. It's a bit tricky. It's not, I mean, it doesn't mean that you cannot do a good job in these occasions, but it means that it could be more difficult. So you must have a look, okay? So therefore you have two kinds of statistics. Statistics on the irregular. So you want to check if the series is or is not very noisy. So you have statistic on the irregular, the statistic M1 to M6. So they are here to check the irregular. And on the seasonal component, so the second part of the potential problems, you have M7 to M11. So you have two parts, you have 11 statistics. You have, you should have 11, 6. Yeah, you have 11, sorry. You have 6 for the irregular and 5 for the seasonal component. I will explain them perhaps a bit later. And Q statistics, and in fact, are linear combination of these 11 indicators. Okay, so keep in mind that these indicators are not really quality statistics. They are warnings. They are warnings. If they are too high, it means that you might have a problem, so check the problem. It does not mean they are too high, you have a problem, okay? It's different. So this is the definition of, we are not going to enter into the details, but what you have to know is that it's very easy to read them. They are all normalized to 1. It means that if they are lower than 1, it's okay. If they are greater than 1, you might have a problem, okay? So you have to check them. So the Q statistics are linear combination of the 11 statistics. So this is the linear combination. You do not have to learn this combination, but it is nice, because if you look, it has been set up, this linear combination, by the Canadian, by Statistics Canada a long time ago. The basic idea is you are going to weight all the statistics. And the weights, by the way, the weights of the statistics is an indication of the importance of the M statistic in your judgment. For example, the higher weight is for M7. You have 18, when the second one is 11. So the highest is M7. M7 is here to tell you that you have or you do not have a seasonal coefficient. So if you have a seasonal, and you can estimate it. So if M7 is bad, it's very often linked to the fact that the seasonal component is very difficult to estimate, either because it is very, very tiny, or because the series is so noisy that you cannot see it really, okay? And you have here all the others. So if you look at the weight, you see that the Canadian people were more interested in the irregular, in the presence of seasonal component, in the irregular, than in the behavior of a seasonal component. So we will have that in mind when we want to interpret Q1. So you have to know that you have two statistics, Q1 and Q2, and that they have been normalized. It's very easy to interpret. If it's smaller than 1, it should be okay. If it's greater than 1, you have to pay attention to something. So please verify a couple of things. I will indicate you what we can verify, okay? So it's very convenient to use. So if I want now, we already saw very briefly that you have an incredible number of quality diagnostics output by X12 or even thermocytes. Well, when a statistician outputs more quality results than you have data, and usually this is the case, it means, case for seasonal adjustment, it means that it does not have in mind a single indicator to judge of the quality of the output. So the statistician is going to give you all the figures, and after you do what you can. So what I'm going to tell you is my experience. What I am doing when I look at a seasonal adjustment and I try to judge the quality of the adjustment. So it's important in production time also to get a very quick idea of the quality of the adjustment. You want in production time to focus on the problems. So you want to have a quick view of the problems, if any. Okay. How to summarize the information? By the way, in this occasion, it's just basic common sense, just really basic common sense. I do not want to have, I want to work on a series, I want to seasonally adjust a series that has a seasonal component. If there's no seasonality, I do not want to adjust it. It's just basic common sense. So first thing, you have to check for the presence of seasonality and calendar effects and outliers. Okay, it's just basic common sense. Second thing for me is that I must have an idea of the size of these components. I mean, if the seasonal component is very small, it's likely that I will have a lot of problems to get a good estimate, and it's for nothing because it's very small. So if I have it or if I have not it, it doesn't make a difference in the economic interpretation of a series. So I'm not going to try to spend a lot of time on a series for which the seasonal component is tiny. I don't want to lose my time, okay? And this is the same for calendar effects. If the calendar effect is too small, or if it's too difficult too unstable, I won't spend any time on it, okay? Because I will never be able to give a proper estimate of the effect. So stop right now. It doesn't make sense to try, okay? After, when I decide if I have to do the job, I will check the quality of the job. So for me, I need to have very quickly a first idea, do I have problems or not? So I will have a look to the Q statistics. And after, I will do a testing for the absence of residual and calendar effect. So I will. So for me, I have a basic selection of indicator, the graph of a series, the seasonally adjusted series and the trend cycle. This is the graph of a seasonal irregular component. So these are the two graphs we are looking at every time. You know the main results, you have the two graphs. The number of observations on the span of a series, it's important for me. Why? because if I do not have a lot of information, I cannot expect a very stable model, and I do not want to have too many regressors in my model. So probably if I have just, let me be clear. If I have 3 years of data, which means 12 data for a quarterly series, I will certainly not try to estimate a trading day effect, because I have just 12 data. I mean, it's impossible. I cannot estimate, for example, a leap year effect. I might have no leap year in my 3 years. So how can I do that? So you see, the number of observation is pretty important. Too small number is not good. A too large number is usually not good too. The decomposition model, it's important for me to know if it's multiplicative or additive. You will understand that next week. The presence absence of trading day effect, the presence absence of specific calendar effects. Okay, this is what I want. And the ARIMA model used, to be honest, I put it because sometimes the ARIMA model used will indicate you some problems. What I want also, the list of detected outliers. It's important for me to see that the COVID crisis has been really detected, for example. The Q statistics. So I already, no, not yet. It was, you see here, it's basically a descriptive analysis of the raw data. Here you have a statistical test of a list of detected outliers, the Q statistics, the results of tests for the presence of seasonality in the series, the presence of residual seasonality, the presence of residual trading day. And I want also something which is the decomposition of the variance of a stationary part of a series, because this thing will give me an idea of the size of every component. So let me show you. It's not, sorry, it's not that complex. At the end of the day, you have a simple sheet for each series. This is what I have. Let me comment it. You recognize, of course, the two graphs here. We already saw them a lot. Okay. Here on this part, let me put it perhaps a bit larger. In the second part of the graph, here of a sheet, here you have descriptive analysis, number of observation, the span, the ARIMA model, the decomposition model, the presence for trading day effect or Easter effect here, the Q statistic, they are in green because they are good, they are smaller than 1. The decomposition of variance, so I can see that in this series, the seasonality explains 98% of the variance. The irregular is very small, no trading day effect, and a small cycle. So it makes sense to seasonally adjust the series, and that's it. And after I have diagnostics. So on the left, you have the outliers with their significance. And after you have the seasonality test. So we know that your series is seasonal. To be honest, the graph shows you that it is seasonal, but you have a test here. You have a residual seasonality. You can see that the second test, the Young-Bock test, do not agree with the others, but you apply a majority rule, which is okay, and you have no residual trading day effect. So this is, for me, this is my quality report. After, if something is going wrong, with some kind of, if you are used to that, and you will be used in a few months, if you perform seasonal adjustment on a regular basis, you can see from this graphic that you have problems or not. And you can verify your feelings using the statistical test behind. Okay, so this is for me the perfect quality report. Okay, do you have any question on that? Unfortunately, you do not have it directly from GD+. but I will explain that next week, how we can generate this kind of report very quickly. Okay? Do you have any question? If not, yes, I will just come back to you. Okay, so if you do not have any question, we can do a short break, and after we will go to the software. And now we know where we can find. I will show you where you can find the results. Okay, and we can start playing with the software and assessing the quality of the adjustment. For example, for the Q&A, we will start to work on that. Any question? No?
I think question at the moment.
So it seems to be okay. Everyone is down or everyone is happy. Probably down because it has been a long week and people should be tired because it's a large amount of information you got since Monday. So you will sleep well, I'm sure. You will sleep well during the weekend. I'm pretty sure of that. So a short break. Let us say we start back at 6 o'clock, okay? And short break, 20 minutes. It's too long?
So at 12 here.
Back here.
No, I noticed that we say, every time we say 10 minutes, and it takes 10 minutes. So if we say 6 o'clock, we will start at 6 o'clock, okay? I will start. And that's it. So Leah will say at 6 o'clock, go ahead.
Yes, 6 o'clock in yours, and then 12 o'clock Jakarta time.
Yes, 6 o'clock. Yeah. Yes, you're right. Yeah. That's why you were smiling. Sorry, I'm tired.
Okay, it's okay.
So, yes, I was looking at my computer. So it's 6 o'clock. Yes. So for you, it's 3 o'clock. No, it's not 3 o'clock. It's plus 6. It's 12 o'clock. Okay.
12 o'clock here.
I'm sorry. I'm dizzy. So see you in 20 minutes. Okay.
Okay, see you.
So we should start.
Yes, Dominique, please.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Leah. Okay, so I'm going to use JDemetra from now, and I'm going to share, of course, my screen, and I will disconnect from GD Plus to work with you on the data. Okay. So I disconnect. You can see that each time I want to close, the software is asking me, do you want to save the changes you made to the workspace? So up to now, we never saved anything because it's just a training. But usually you will have to save things. I will explain that next week, okay? Not now, not really now. So no, I don't want to change anything. So this was my own quality report. So let me now go back to GD+. So please, with me, you open GD+. So usually if you put a star on your files, you will find your files here. I have a new file you will share with me next week, I guess, or perhaps later, which are the monthly trade data. So up to now, I will stay perhaps with the trade quarterly data, the ASEAN trade quarterly data. Okay, so I will use this file, the trade ASEAN data. So seasonal adjustment, multiprocessing, new. Okay, so I change because I'm working with quarterly data, I will go to RSR1, and I will put all my quarterly trade data, quarterly data inside. So I have 291 items. Of course, I'm not going to go through all the things, but just some of them. I remember the 27 was something special yesterday. But anyway, I will explain you now on some series how I judge the quality of the adjustment. We will do it together. And after, I will leave you do your own experimentations. And if you have a problem, you will tell us through the chat, and you will say on which series you were working on, and I will see with you what are the problems. Okay, so I run the adjustment. It's done, so very, very fast on my computer. And let us start with the first one, animals, the export of animals, okay? So this series, if I have a look to it, at the moment, let me just check things. If I look at the graph, which is always what I do not see a real seasonal component, okay? I can see that the series is moving very, very fast on the second part since 2017, but I do not see a real seasonal component because I asked to the software to do the adjustment. It did, so you have the estimation of a seasonal component here, but you can see that, for example, if I use only the red lines to get an average idea of things, I can see that the Q4 is about 1.06. So this is a multiplicative model. So it's 6% above a normal situation. The first quarter is 3% below, and the second quarter, 6% below. Sorry. Excuse me. So I do have an estimate of a seasonal component, which does not mean that I have a seasonally adjusted series. just because we ask for the adjustment, so the software, the algorithm did an adjustment. So first thing we have to do is to check if you have a seasonal component. So seasonality test, you have a lot of things here. Let me comment a bit what you have. You follow with me, okay? Because I'm not going to use the Zoom. So the first thing is the original transform series. I do not like to use this one because you might have the outliers inside. And if you have the outliers inside, they may, if they are strong outliers, they may just pollute the computation of the test. So I go to linearized series, a series without the outliers and without the training day coefficient, if any. So I go there, and you see that for sure I have a big doubt on the seasonal component, okay? Because the first one, the first test say a clear no, when all the others are saying, oh yes, perhaps, but not sure. So what is clear is that I will have probably if I have a seasonal coefficient, I will have probably some problems to detect it. Let me see what is the final. You see, each time I have seasonality not present, seasonality perhaps present, and so on. X11 has its own seasonality test, which is the combined test. So you can find it on the fourth row of the tree on the left, okay? So if I go to it, I will have at the end something, okay. So for X11, they have an identifiable seasonality present. So if I trust this test, I will perform the seasonal adjustment. So I will, for this case, we will see at the end if we do it or not. But it might be relevant to do it. Let me comment also something different. If I put here, you see, I click on the raw data, so I see the raw data, okay? If I have a look now I can select it down also. If I select the seasonally adjusted figures and except at the end, no, between the orange, sorry, and the blue, you do not have a huge difference between the two series, okay? So it's because you do not have a large seasonal component. So let me continue my interpretation before I decide what I'm going to do. If you have a look to the right graph, you see that the dots are everywhere on the screen, okay, on the graph. So it means that you have a large irregular. So for sure, it will be more difficult to smooth this kind of thing, okay? You see? So what bothers me a bit is that at the end, if you look at for the fourth quarter, roughly you have this kind of cloud. It's an slightly increasing tool, okay? So it's okay. This one is a bit more problematic because it increases up to this time, and then after you have a clear rupture in the seasonal component. It seems that X11 is doing a pretty good job following this movement, okay? Here it's very, very erratic, but it takes an average evolution. So it's not so bad despite the irregular. But of course, we can see here that the seasonal component is moving very, very fastly, at least for the third and fourth quarter. Even if it's not very big, it's moving. For example, the first estimation at the beginning of a span in 2010 was around 4%, and now it's around 9%. So it's a huge evolution. Excuse me. Anyway, it seems to go pretty well. The smoothing seems to be pretty well, but I have a strong evolution. So it's likely that I will find some problem in my M statistics. Let us have a look to the M statistics. Here, so you can find them in decomposition, X11, okay? And you go to quality measures, the last item, and you go to summary. So this is what I was expecting. First, the M7, which is basically a statistics that shows if there's an identifiable seasonal component, is correct. It's below 1. Most of the irregular statistics are correct. You have just the first one, but everything looks pretty correct. And you have a problem with the fluctuation in the seasonal component. It's moving very fast. It's too high. It's just because it's too high, okay? The seasonal component is moving too fast. But when we have a look at the graph, it seems that the seasonal component is pretty well estimated by X11. So my conclusion here, we have a pretty weak seasonal component. It seems that X11 can estimate and identify it, okay? I have the graph and the M statistics shows that the seasonal component is moving quite a lot at the end of the series, especially in the fourth and third quarter. But it seems that the smoothing is pretty good and that X11 is taking the evolution right, pretty right. So that's fine. So for me, up to now, it's pretty good, not so bad, okay? So I just have to check now if I have a residual seasonal component. So I go to the SR series to see. So in the SR series, I do not see any seasonal coefficient. That's fine. The combined test is okay also. Let me check. It seems to be okay. It was it was for the seasonal coefficient, sorry, the presence of seasonality. So no seasonality, no residual seasonality. I just have to check now if I have excuse me, if I have a residual trading day effect somewhere. So it's in main results. I will see it here at the end. I do not have a residual seasonal component in the trading day component in the seasonally adjusted series. So for me, I would say, okay, I'm not very happy with the adjustment, but it's not bad. So I would accept it, even if it's not easy, okay? I would accept it. I will probably have a look to the trading day coefficient, but we will see that next week with the monthly data, okay? Do you have any question on what I did, okay? And after I will use another example. Any question? No, I do not see any question in the chat. So it seems okay for everyone.
Hi, Dominique.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious when you're analyzing the right-hand charts, right? So this can be what do you call it? Different from one person to another person. Right? So is there any statistical test that's quite robust, yeah, to say that, okay, this is no problem, okay, this is not very clear, something like that.
No, you do not have such a test.
No.
You do not have. No, that's why I'm using always a battery of tests, of indicator, a short battery. If you think about my quality report, you do not have a lot of tests. But as the series here is not very clear, it's not a clear series, I have to pay attention to some other tests just to see if I have a problem somewhere or not. By definition, a statistical test is a global overview of things, and it might be just wrong. I mean, so you saw in this occasion, in this very specific situation, if I trust the seasonality test, okay, they will tell me that basically I have no seasonal component. Okay, I'm not sure, so you should say, okay, I'm not going to do the job. Because it's a difficult series, okay? So here, if I go to another test, which is the combined test by X11, it will tell me that there's a seasonal component, which is based also on test, okay? You can see a lot of tests here. He said, okay, I have a seasonality in my time series, even if it's small, and I can identify it. So in this case, I will say, okay, let us see the results. Okay, he can do the job himself. Let us see the results. So for me, I'm looking, I will have a look to the graph. And the graph, as I commented it, there's a lot of irregular, of course, a lot. But for the first quarter, it sounds correct. I do not have a very strong evolution of a seasonal component. It's a small component, around 3%. The second one, I would say, yes, it's not so bad. I mean, I do respect more or less. It's a good smoothing of a cloud, and it's around 6%, minus 6%. So it's not nothing, minus 6%. Okay, so it's small, but not so small. So I will say, okay, because it seems that I'm doing a good job, pretty good job, I will accept this kind of, I will accept that my series is seasonal. So here, if I look at the test, they do not know. Basically, they do not know. So I have to take a decision, and because the graph looks okay, I will assume that I do have a seasonal component and that X11 is doing a pretty good job. The point, of course, is that because the seasonal component is moving fast, even if it's not so big, I will have problems with my quality statistic, my M statistics. And if I go to the M statistics, of course, I can see that M8 to M11 are not that good. Okay, so it's not, you see now the objective of this M statistics is to bring your attention to the evolution here of a seasonal component. And the only way to see if it's well taken into account or not, it's to go to the main result, to the graph. And the graph will say you, yes, it's not so bad. So in this, okay, you see, I guess your test do not give you the answer. You have seasonality perhaps present, perhaps, okay? Perhaps, and no. I need, the majority is perhaps, so I have to take a decision. And the final decision is with the combined test. Is it okay, Agus, the answer? But you do not have a single, you cannot. You cannot.
Yeah, thank you.
I can complete again. So now we enter in a very different part of the training. Now it's just experience. I'm trying to give you my experience. We saw some kind of, we had some lectures with some, let us say, with cut marks, theoretical things. And now I'm giving my experience, which is just how to play with the quality indicators. So it's never easy, but let me tell you something important. Of course, if you have to adjust 290 time series each month, you are not going to do what I'm doing every month. It's impossible, okay? It's absolutely impossible. So let me tell you how it should be. Usually, each year, you are going to do the first time you are doing the adjustment, you have no choice but go through each series to check what I'm doing now. It's a long work, but you have to do it. There's no other way. Yeah? So you are, in most of the case, you will have no problem. So in most of the case, the decision will be quite easy. In this case, it's bad luck, it's the first one. The decision is not easy. So you will do that the first time, you will do a complete analysis. And you will decide what is your model. So here I will say, okay, RSR1 is correct, gives a pretty good result. I'm not going to change anything in this specification. After you go for the others, and perhaps you are going to change a few things. And at the end of the day, you will say, okay, that's fine. For this time, I can run the adjustment, and here are my seasonally adjusted data. So I do have them, no problem. Now, next month or next quarter, you are not going to do it again. You are not going. You are going to suppose that your model is still valid. And you are going to run, not blindly, but you are going to run the adjustment in production time for 1 year. And the year after 1 year, you will say, okay, are my model, are my specifications still valid? So you will do a new analysis, not as complete as the first one, but you will do a pretty detailed analysis, checking each of the series to see if you have a problem or not. Hopefully, you will see what, at the beginning, you will do it with the user interface, the graphical interface in JDemetra, and when you will be strong enough, experienced enough, you will develop an automatic process. So you will build your adjustment, and you will just have a quality report for each series. You can check if it's going well or not very quickly. So this is the way you will have to modify and to set up a seasonal adjustment process, production process. Okay, so now it's just a training. So we go into details to any series, through any series. Do you have other question, or I take the second example? Okay, so let me go to the other one. So the other one, as usual, the first thing I'm looking at is the graph, because with my experience, I can do the job with these two graphs only. I do not need the statistical test, okay? Because here I will see that, for example, I have in a pretty similar situation than the previous one, which means that I have here quite a lot of irregular. You see the dots are pretty erratic for each quarter. The span is quite large, okay? So I have, but on average, I have 8%, 7% for the fourth quarter, and all the other quarter, and this one is 4%, and two of the seasonal coefficients are moving quite a lot, the second and the fourth quarter. So if I have a look to how it moves, you see that the blue line for the fourth quarter is pretty good. It's pretty in the middle of a cloud of the dots, okay? Here it's not so bad. It follows quite the cloud. This point is an outlier, but it doesn't matter. The smoothing is not very, very affected by it, so it's not so bad. This one, once again, it follows pretty well the evolution of a cloud, so it's not that bad. The more specific would be the first quarter, but it's so tiny, the seasonal component here, that I'm not very worried, okay? So here I have a very similar situation, which means that I have a lot of irregular, so I'm a bit worried for the monthly series, but it's another story. I have quite a lot of irregular. The seasonal coefficient is moving pretty fast, but it seems that I have one, okay? So now, from this graph, I would say, okay, I would check the figures now, but I'm not very worried. Small seasonal coefficient, the seasonality is moving pretty fast, but X11 seems to do a good job. Now I verify my diagnostics. On the linearized time series, I do have, obviously, the majority rule tells me that it's a seasonal time series, okay? If I look to the combined test, I will see that I have certainly an identifiable seasonality present. So my series is seasonal, okay, from the statistical point of view. From my feeling, it was seasonal too, but I have a confirmation here. If I go to the quality measure here, I have, as expected, I have some problems at the end because the seasonal coefficients are moving pretty fastly, but it's not a big deal because it seems that X11 does a pretty good job. So it's okay for me. And now I have just to check that I do not have a residual seasonal coefficient component in my series. I do not have. All the test agrees I have nothing. So for me, once again, and you see it's easier. The more you will do this kind of analysis, the easier it will be. It will be very fast after. Any question on this one? It's very similar to the previous one, even very different too, okay? Any question? So you see that for me, these two graphs are the most important. Unfortunately, when you have 1,000 time series, you cannot look at the 1,000 graph. You cannot, it's complex, okay? So sometimes you will just trust the software, but we'll see that later. I do another one. This one, the seasonality is clear. I do have a clear seasonal component here. There's no doubt, okay? There's no doubt that it's an additive model. Here you see I'm not around one. I have negative and positive figures. So for me, it's pretty clear that the series is seasonal. The cloud is not completely erratic. It's well designed, okay? And the smoothing seems correct. So here, I anticipate absolutely no problem. So my series is seasonal. The seasonal component looks well estimated. I'm not even sure I will find problems in VM statistics. So now I have to check the details, if I can say so. Do I have a seasonal component? Yes, it's clear. Is the combined test similar? Yes. Identifiable seasonality present. Let me have a look to the summary. No problem except a very small one. So the Q statistics are very good and all the statistics appears good. So no problem here. Do I have a residual seasonal component? No. So my feeling is that why should I bother for this series? It looks okay. Of course, because of the last point, I'm not paying attention to the COVID crisis, okay? I will do that next week. At the moment, I'm just playing with the figures. Here I should have a look on the treatment of the last point, but I will do that next week, okay? Let me take another one. Oh, it's a bit different. It's a bit different, but what I will, you see immediately, the seasonal component seems not very clear, okay? And it seems to move quite a lot in the sense that you see what I see on here and here, I do not see it after. So I have a coefficient that is moving coefficient. The seasonality is not constant. If I have a look to the graph, I can see that here I am at 4%, 3%, 2%, and here minus 6%. So I do not have a very strong seasonal component, but it seems to be present anyway. And you can see that, curiously, I do not have a lot of irregular. I say that because the blue curve is very close to the cloud, very close. So the irregular is not big, and the smoothing with X11 looks pretty correct, okay? And here, you can see that it's moving a lot because, for example, at the beginning of a period, the seasonal coefficient for Q2 was positive, it was 4%. And at the end of the period, it's negative, and it's around minus 1%. So it decreased. Here, you have an increase. So once again, I expect some problems with M statistics, M8 to M11, okay? I will see that now directly. I will check for the seasonal component. Yes, I have a seasonal component. They agree on that. It was not very clear on the graph, but they agree. We have the combined test is saying the same, definitely. Yeah, sure. And if I have a look to the quality measures, as expected, everything is pretty correct except the two last. And the two last are pretty good. They are very close to 1, okay? And the Q statistics are correct. So last verification, I have no residual seasonality. So I would say, for me, this one is correct too, okay? Let me take a bad one, because at the moment I'm just using the good one. Let me try to find something that is not going well. I have a severe here, okay, for cereals. Okay, let me check what is going on with cereals. Okay, so the main results. Okay, we have cereals. So what's going on here? You see that I do have an additive model, because you can see on the right, you can see negative values and positive values for the seasonal coefficient. You can see that it's moving pretty fast, okay? And you have quite a lot of irregular. I mean, the cloud is more erratic than it was for the series before, okay? And the first and the third quarter are moving pretty fast, okay? So it's not good news, but we should have problems with M statistics. Here, it's much more difficult to judge the size of a component, because this is an additive model, but it looks not so big, but I cannot read it here. That's why I prefer multiplicative model, because I can see immediately the size of a seasonal component. So here I'm a bit puzzled. So I have to go here to the seasonality test. So let me check the test. So basically, a seasonal component is detected, okay? Let me have a look to the summary measures. As expected, I do have a problem at the end because of the evolution. I have also a problem in the irregular, but let it. So I have some problems here. I do not see the size of a seasonal component. So let me go back to have an idea of the size. I should make the difference between the seasonally adjusted series and the raw data. So between the blue curve, this one, and this one. Okay, so the difference is not so big, so the seasonal coefficient is not so big too. Okay, it seems to be pretty correct. So do I have a residual seasonal component? No. Yeah. Is it identifiable? I guess yes. Yeah. So in this case, I will trust the software. But you can see immediately that I'm not as confident when I do have an additive model. It's much easier to interpret the graph when you have a multiplicative model. So let me show you. Let us imagine that I want to change the model. So now, instead of an additive model, so why is it severe? Or yes, I should. First, I will check why it is severe. What is the problem, in fact? So in the irregular residual, it's severe because I have still a seasonal component in my ARIMA model, in my residual of the ARIMA model, okay? And that's it. This is the only problem. So it's severe because you detect something wrong in the residual of the ARIMA model. So it means that the ARIMA model has a problem. You cannot fit easily an ARIMA model to this series. Okay, but I told you that I don't care about the ARIMA model. Okay, I don't care because I'm using X11. I don't care so much. So this one for me is not a big deal. But for the sake of a training, I will show you what you can do. In this kind, I said, because I'm using the RSR1 specification, I'm going to fix the ARIMA model. I told the GD Plus that I want to use an airline model. Okay, I can say, well, I'm going to let the software decide what is the good ARIMA model. So I will change the specification. You see here I have the specification. I will say for the function, I have an ARIMA modeling here. So I will say automatic, do it automatically and apply. So what's going on? It doesn't, let me restore things. You see, you have to pay attention to this graph, okay? If you can, you will see that you have very few modifications, very, very few. So I click on automatic and I say apply, and I see very, very small modification. So let me see if I solve the problem. It's good now, it's okay. The Q statistics are bad, but you know, we are going back to them. You know, it's because the model is evolving, the seasonal coefficient is evolving a lot, but it's well taken into account. And after everything seems to be correct now. So the Q statistics are bad. Let me have a look to them. So it's always the same thing. It's mainly due to the last statistics. The M7 statistic is good. I have some problem in the irregular, and the Q statistic is bad, but the Q2 is very close to 1, but they are not very good. Okay, but it doesn't puzzle me very much. So I would say, okay, Perhaps this one is better. Okay. To judge the quality of the ARIMA model, I should do something different, but I will not do it now. I reserve that to the advanced course because we need to know what an ARIMA model is. Okay, so this one, I could accept if you want the new thing. Let me change also something. I will say, I restore. I come back to the previous one, okay? So I'm still in the, I'm still with, sorry, I begin to be tired. I'm still with the airline model now, but I will change the decomposition model. I will, specification, and I want to change it. So the function, I want a log one. I want a multiplicative model. Does it change a lot of things? Not very much, okay. You saw that you have basically the same behavior of a seasonal component, but now you can express it directly. So it's 8% for the first one, and for the fourth one, and for the third one is around -5%. So it's not huge, but it's big. And what did I do something good? No, it's still severe, always because of ARIMA modeling. But the Q statistics are not so bad. So let me just do an automatic estimation of a ARIMA model, apply. So it doesn't change a lot of things in the seasonal coefficient, but now my model should be okay. Everything is okay. I have a bad statistics, okay, Q statistics. Basically, I guess, due to the evolution, it's not always the same thing. So when I change the ARIMA model, it doesn't change a lot. It doesn't change a lot the seasonal coefficient, but what I observe is that I do have a short problem in the irregular, and it's not good for the Q statistics, but it doesn't change a lot of things. So for my own, to be comfortable, I would go to the multiplicative model because it's easier to interpret, and I will stay with the airline model because it's easier to estimate. So you see how you can change a bit things. So if you want, you can try on 1 or 2 series. We have 20 minutes left. So if you want, you can try, do your own experience on 1 series and tell me if you have some problems. Okay? So I will stop to share the, okay, is it okay for you? So you can.
One question, Dominique.
Yeah, there's a question somewhere, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, I guess, yeah.
The choice of additive or multiplicative moving average in the system is defined automatically, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It's based maybe some on the optimization something.
Yeah, yeah.
Should be the best, right? But then you decided to change from additive to multiplicative.
Yeah.
And second question is there any way of comparing, maybe using F-test or something to see whether the new one there's some improvement in the new one or something?
Okay, so the second answer is easier to, the second question is easier, so I can answer it. Yes, you have a way to compare 2 ARIMA models. We will see that in the advanced training because it's a bit technical, but you have a way, you have statistics to do that. Okay, so there's no problem from the statistical point of view to check the two different ARIMA models and to choose the, let us say, the best one. after the test on additive multiplicative. I do prefer multiplicative. For many reasons, I do prefer it, because in most of the case, the model is additive, is multiplicative, but and because a multiplicative model is much easier to interpret and to comment from the statistical point of view, because all the seasonal component, all the seasonal factors are in percentage. So you know exactly what is the importance, which is not the case for the additive model. So the point, I asked the question specifically to Agustin Maraval, who was designing thermocytes. So I asked it, Agustin, why don't go with the multiplicative every time? Because it's easier to interpret it, and it gives very similar results. And he told me, because the only reason is the fact that at one time, when you do a multiplicative model with thermocytes and with X11, at the beginning, you start to take the logarithm, okay? And so after you apply moving average, you apply linear filters to logarithm. So you are going to do, for example, moving averages on logarithm. So you do the average of logarithms, okay? But when you want to come back, unfortunately, the exponential, when you take back the exponential of a sum is not the sum of the exponential. Okay, so you do have somewhere, a bias you introduce when you take the logarithm. So I say, okay. But if you think a bit more, this is not the way X11 is working. X11 is using the ARIMA modeling. So for the ARIMA modeling, we have a problem, because for the ARIMA modeling, we are going to take the logs to make the work and to go back after, and to have a forecast and to go back. But we know how to do that. We know to correct the forecast from the bias statistically. And after, X11 is not using the model. It's using, even for the multiplicative, it never used the ARIMA model, never X11. It used the forecast, but not the ARIMA model. When SITS is using the ARIMA model. So the choice between additive and multiplicative is more important for thermocytes than for X11. And my experience is that it's much easier to use a multiplicative model, much easier. You have much less problems. The point is that in some occasions, you might have, you cannot take the log. For example, if you are, sometimes you have a series with negative values. It's just life, you have negative values. So you cannot take the logarithm. And you have to do with additive models. So my feeling is just, I'm more comfortable with a multiplicative model. And as soon as I can change it to a multiplicative, I do it. Sometimes it's not possible. In this case, it would be possible, and I would do it. So that's why, seasonal adjustment is a very curious topic. As I told you at the very beginning, each of the pieces of seasonal adjustment, the pieces of a Lego, if I can say so, is very simple. There's no big problem to understand what a moving average is, what a test of seasonality is, what a seasonal coefficient is, what every piece is. You can understand it more or less, but you can get a good idea of a concept without any difficulty. The real problem comes when you put everything together. So what I'm doing when I comment a result should be very, very disturbing for you, because it seems easy, but I jump from one thing to the other. And when Agus asks me a question, I can answer, or I can say that the question for me is not really relevant. It doesn't really matter, or it depends on the series. So for me, it's natural, and for you, it should be very disturbing. But you will see, and you do not see it now, but now you are much more habile. You are much better now than you were five days ago. Because now you can play with the software, you have no difficulty. I say, look at the graph, you go to the graph. I say, look, click there, you have a seasonality test. So you are, it's coming. You can read the things now. Now it's just a question of practice, okay? Just a question. So, and the good principle is keep it simple. At the beginning, keep it simple. The big problem are coming, will come later, okay? So we will do more exercise next week, okay? We will do more and more. I'm pretty confident that at the end of a training, this first training, you will be able to solve 95%, not to say 98% of points of the series, of the adjustment. After the 2 or 3% remaining could be much more complex. Okay. Is it okay? Yeah. So perhaps we will stop now because it's time. It's almost 1 p.m. for you.
There are 2 questions before we end it.
It will be a pleasure. Yeah, I can read them. Yeah, thank you, Siska. Let me read them. Could you please explain about y-axis in the right graph again? Okay, I will come back to that. And the second one, for dataset trade, many status invalid, quality not good. So how to adjust or edit? On status invalid, quality. I'm not sure I do understand the second question. Yes, yes. Yeah, I understand now. So let me go back to JDemetra to answer to the 2 questions. Okay. So I share again my screen. Okay. So the first question is about the y-axis of this graph, the second graph here. Okay. Which is the seasonal component and the irregular component. So the question is about how to interpret this axis. It depends. When you have a multiplicative model, as in this case, here, this is the value, simply the value, in both cases, this is the value of a seasonal coefficient. So if you take here the blue curve, the value here is 1.031. So this is exactly the value. So, but when this is a multiplicative model, it means that 1.031 means that the seasonal coefficient result in an increase is plus 3%. Okay, 1.03 means plus 3%. So it's very easy to interpret. You know exactly the size of the coefficient. At the beginning here, it was 0.93, so it was minus 7%, okay? It was minus 7%. So you can immediately interpret it. Now, if I take an additive model, which is the case here, I can see that the value is 28 billions, 28 billions, 200 millions, and so on. So it's a value, and doesn't tell me anything about the importance. Okay, it's 8 billion, but I do not know what 8 billions means. In the other, it was, I do not remember, but plus 6%. So it was fine. But here, I don't know. Okay? So that's why it's always the y-axis is always the value of the points of the various points. It's the value, but you can interpret it very easily with a multiplicative model and not so easily with the additive model. So now the second question was about the severe. So the question what most of these statistics have a severe. So to see that, I will sort by quality, and it's not most, but I have a lot of, on 291, I have perhaps 20 series severe, which is less than 10%, but it's pretty a lot. So what does it mean? Severe is just an indicator. Beware, something is getting wrong in the adjustment. Might be wrong. So it's not getting wrong, might be wrong. So pay attention. This is what it means. Okay. When you have good, it means that I do not detect something specific in the adjustment. But it doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean that could be good, okay? But sometimes you have to check things and you have to change things. And severe can be severe and not so severe. Let me check, for example, the first thing, we have an error. We never saw the error, so let me check what is the error, so you can see why you have an error, okay? It's a very specific series. You have huge outliers. I don't know what it is, but doesn't matter. So you have an error because probably something cannot be computed. I don't know what cannot be computed at this time. Let me check the results. Oh, yes. Yes, something is, because of this incredible point, you cannot assume that the annual total for the seasonally adjusted series is equal to the annual total of the raw data because of this very curious point. So because of that, you have an error and you have to investigate. So the first thing to do is to try to understand this point. To know, I don't know what it is, but it's incredibly higher than the rest of the series. So you have to investigate that. See if it's true. You say, okay, it's true, and you accept that you will not have a coherence between the annual total of a seasonally adjusted series and the annual total of the raw data because of this point. So it won't be it's not certain that it's a big problem, okay? After, for the severe, I guess that most of the severe things will come from the ARIMA modeling. Yeah, you see, it's coming from the ARIMA modeling. I guess it will be the same for the next one. Yeah. Oh no, this one is different. This one is because you have too it's a warning. It's not a judgment. It's just a warning. It is beware. You have too many outliers. Okay. So this is true. It seems that you have a lot of outliers. And so you have to justify the outliers. If you are fine with the number of outliers, everything will be good except the Q statistics, and we could do some investigation on that. If I go to the next one, number of outliers, the same, okay? This one, so the severe, I will stop number of outliers. So the severe does not mean that it is bad. It means that I might have a serious problem. So check that. So I do have here a huge number of outliers. So does it mean anything for you? So you check. It's likely that you might have a lot of outliers, especially during the crisis. During the COVID crisis, most of the points at the end will be outliers. So if you have 44 points and if you have 4 outliers, you have more than 10% of outliers. You are close to 10%. And so you will have always a severe. So to answer to the question, in this case, most of the problems are coming from the number of outliers because we are on quarterly time series. So if you have 3-4 outliers, you have a lot of outliers, and JDemetra is going to issue a severe warning. Check that, okay? Perhaps it's a problem of data, check that. The other reason might be the ARIMA model, because in the RSA1 specification, I'm saying the ARIMA model is this one, and perhaps it's not completely the best one. And so you might have problems in the adjustment, and JDemetra will tell you, implicitly will tell you, change the ARIMA model, okay? So what I did just before, and usually it solves things. So it's not, keep in mind that severe does not mean that it's wrong. It just means that you might have a problem somewhere, a severe problem here in the number of outliers. So it's just a big warning, okay? Is it okay, the answer? Yeah?
Mr. Yaifol, is it okay?
Yes, it's okay. Thank you very much.
Good. So now more and more the questions are pertinent, always. A question is always pertinent. But sometimes more and more the answer will be not easy, and sometimes linked to experience more than to statistical test, okay? Especially, you know, when you have a limited number of observations, and 10 years means 40 or 120 observations, which is very, very few if you compare to the size of a survey, when you have 3,000 business and whatever. So statistical tests are very useful, but my experience is that you have to look at them and to make your own judgment with the quality of a graph, for example. We will come on that more and more during next week, okay? So if there's no more question in the chat, and I think there's no more, we could stop now for today and for the weekend. So okay. Recover well, sleep well.
Yeah, you too.
I will. Trust me, I will. And I see you on Monday.
Okay. See you on Monday.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Why is it so important to correct the series?
Both.
why forecasts are very to get estimates. Can we deal with missing value? Yes. So I send my answer. So when I send the answer, you should have the answer to the correct answer.
Yes.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have results of the polling? Not yet. I will receive them. Okay. So I see now the face of the people. So bye-bye. Bye to everyone. Okay. I see
Thank
you
you.
on Monday.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Have a nice weekend for everyone.
Have a nice weekend.
Ciao, ciao.
Yeah, thank
Bye.
you. Thank you for everyone. Have a nice weekend. See you on Monday next week. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
See you on Monday.
See you on Monday.
Pak Fatur masih sholat kayaknya ya.
Iya.
Pak Eka. Udah. Di end aja Mbak Tari ya.
Oke, aku end ya.
End aja ya. Soalnya yang
Oke.
dua masih sholat. Masih Jumatan.
Iya.
Oke.
Oke, makasih Tari.
Makasih Mbak Lia.
Semuanya. Siska, thank you.
Wah, sampai nanti sore.
Ya, jam 4 ya.